GNOME 3.32 has been released and it brings a crop of new features and enhancements to the Linux desktop. Plus, Microsoft's new Skype for Web no longer supports ChromeOS or Linux. We're going to discuss that today. And the Linux Foundation has announced the formation of the OpenJS Foundation to help support the JavaScript community. One operating system for two platforms. It's been tried and it's failed, but PureOS is attempting this. One Linux for both the PC and the smartphone. And Mozilla Firefox has announced the stable release of its free and encrypted file sharing service called Firefox Send. These are 5 stories that I will be taking into account. And the first story on the docket tonight is the recent release of GNOME 3.32. It's bringing a lot of new features and enhancements to the GNOME desktop. So, this article comes from OMG Ubuntu, and it's written by Joey Snedden. And as always, I'm going to link to all the articles discussed on the show today in the show description. So, GNOME 3.32 just released this week, just a couple of days ago actually. And Joey, in this article, he features 11 of the new features and enhancements in the recently released GNOME 3.32 release. So I'm going to cover at least the 11 that he mentions here in this article. Number 1, fractional scaling. Finally, this is probably the number 1 feature for this release, is the fact that GNOME, previous versions of GNOME did not offer support for fractional scaling. Fractional scaling is really a necessity. With the increase in popularity for high DPI displays, without fractional scaling, your life is going to be miserable because, you know, the text and everything on your display is going to be incredibly small. So now with the fractional scaling, there's a screenshot here for those of you watching the video, where now you can, scale up 125%, 150%, 175%, or 200%. So if you're using one of these very wide displays, such as in the screenshot here, somebody was using a 2560 by 1440 screen resolution, and for such a high DPI display, you're really going to need to up the fractional scaling a little bit. Otherwise, you're just not going to be able to read any of the fonts. One caveat, though, for the fractional scaling support: it's experimental. That's what the GNOME devs are saying, and right now it's only going to work on Wayland sessions only. So if you're using Xorg, you're still not going to be able to do fractional scaling. The second feature is more control over your app permissions. So now GNOME 3.32 is going to give you more control over how installed apps behave and what they can access while they run. So, what kind of permissions, I guess, these apps get. So think of things like Flatpaks, for example, or your file manager, Nautilus. How much access are you giving these programs to your file system? Number 3, a new GNOME icon set. So we discussed this actually on a previous version of Taking Into Account. They're tweaking the GNOME icon set a little bit. That's pretty standard for every release. They're always tweaking the GNOME icon set. They're always tweaking the Adwaita theme, the GTK theme, which is number 4 here in the article, improved Adwaita theme. It's actually very minor improvements. Number 5, though, is a big one. Major improvement as far as performance. So performance enhancements. So you guys know that GNOME historically has been seen as a very heavy desktop environment, as far as it's very heavy on system resources. So much so that it's often the butt of jokes, the GNOME desktop. Well, it's been improving the last couple of releases. They're trying to get things a little bit, more a little faster, a little more streamlined. So both Mutter and the GNOME Shell UI should be a little more responsive in this release than the previous release. Number 6 is granular nightlight control. So those of you that use a nightlight feature, you'll appreciate that. Number 7, the app menus are now officially retired. We also covered this on a previous version of Taking Into Account that the GNOME devs were thinking about getting rid of app menus. That has come to fruition now with this release, 3.32. App menus are no more in GNOME. Also now, number 8, we have on-screen keyboard emojis. So the on-screen keyboard, if you want to pull that up, it now has emojis in it, emoji support. Number 9, round avatars. I'm not sure why that's a feature. I'm not sure if the GNOME devs really think that's a feature, or Joey, who wrote the article, thinks it's a feature, but that's strange. Round avatars, okay, that's a feature. Number 10, GNOME software. So there have been some changes to basically the GNOME Software Center. So the GNOME Software Center now should be a little faster. They worked on performance here. They also have improved the handling of the apps that are available from multiple sources. For example, now you're going to see things that are available as standard repository apps, such as in your, Fedora repository or your Ubuntu repository. You'll also have support for things that are installable as Flatpaks, snaps, etc. So GNOME Software Center keeps getting better and better. Number 11 here in Joey's list, faster Google Drive mounting. So those of you that are Google Drive users, you should be able to get things mounted and mounted quickly now through the Nautilus File Manager. And the summary paragraph here from Joey here, the GNOME Shell desktop has never felt as fast or as fluid as it does in this release. I may have to take his word on that because I'm not a GNOME user. Maybe I'll check out the latest release of GNOME 3.32. Looks like it is a solid release, so I will congratulate all the GNOME devs for a job well done. And the second story on the docket tonight is the news that Microsoft's new Skype for Web no longer supports ChromeOS or Linux. So Microsoft, they've announced this new Skype for Web interface. Skype for Web, you can think of Skype in the browser. So think of something like Google Hangouts, except instead of Google Hangouts, you're Microsoft Skype in the browser. And apparently this is only going to work, on like the Chrome browser in Windows or Mac. Should work on the Chrome browser in ChromeOS and on GNU/Linux, but it doesn't. Or at least it no longer does. Apparently it used to, but now it's not. So it's almost like Microsoft is simply preventing Linux users and ChromeOS users as well from using Skype for Web. ChromeOS is basically a GNU/Linux operating system. It does run a Gen 2 kernel after all. So this seems like kind of a puzzling omission that their Skype for Web app is not going to be available on Linux because, of course, Microsoft loves Linux. Microsoft is a platinum member of the Linux Foundation. They are really all in on supporting free and open source software. And, of course, again, they've been touting how much they love Linux. So it's kind of a strange thing that a web app, which should be cross-platform, really. I mean, if it works on the web, it should just work on any operating system. Why, for some reason, they're preventing Skype for Web from working on ChromeOS and Linux. Now, of course, I want to give Microsoft, the benefit of the doubt. It could be that they're temporarily disabling support in ChromeOS and Linux because maybe the app is not stable. They've got some bugs to work out, but who knows, right? That said, it's not that big of a deal if you want to use Skype on Linux or on ChromeOS. There are actual native apps. We have had a Skype for Linux app for years in Linux, so you can get the normal Skype desktop client on Linux. And for those of you using ChromeOS, of course, you can also install Skype on ChromeOS. You can install an Android Skype app on ChromeOS. Heck, you could probably install the Linux Skype app on ChromeOS now that so many Linux apps are also available for install on ChromeOS. I don't know how that would work, but for sure the Android Skype app should work for you guys that are running ChromeOS. I'm not sure if it's that big of a deal, but the thing is, the Chrome browser, I mean, what's the difference between the Chrome browser on Windows, Mac, Linux, and ChromeOS? If it works on one, really, you should get it working on all. It doesn't seem like this would be that hard to get Skype for Web working. Again, cross-platform on every operating system. So, again, I want to give Microsoft a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. Maybe, again, they're working out the bugs, but I don't know. I do know this, though. Since Microsoft bought Skype, Skype has really never been the same. It does seem like Skype is becoming more and more irrelevant. Probably because there are so many better alternatives than Skype nowadays. Of course, Google Hangouts being the big alternative, but even other things. You guys know I love the Zoom video conferencing software. And then if you prefer free and open source stuff, there's things like Jitsi out there and dozens of others. So Microsoft Skype for Web not supporting ChromeOS or Linux, whatever. And the third story on the docket tonight is about the Linux Foundation. They recently announced the formation of a new foundation within the Linux Foundation called the OpenJS Foundation. And basically this is a foundation designed to support the JavaScript community. So this article comes from False Bytes. Reading briefly, quote, "The Linux Foundation has announced the formation of OpenJS Foundation to support the JavaScript community. They have done this by merging existing Node.js Foundation and JS Foundation." So there were two foundations that previously existed, the Node.js Foundation and simply the JS Foundation. And those organizations now have been merged to form this new OpenJS Foundation. By combining the two foundations, the Linux Foundation is hoping to support different projects of the JavaScript ecosystem in a better manner. So the OpenJS Foundation, what they're trying to do is it's going to be comprised of basically 31 different open source projects. So JavaScript related projects such as Appium, Dojo, jQuery, Node.js, Webpack, etc., etc., etc. OpenJS, the OpenJS Foundation already is supported by 30 members. Some of them also sit on the Linux Foundation. So some of the big members are Google, Microsoft, PayPal, GoDaddy, IBM. So it does have some corporate backings. And part of the reason that the Linux Foundation decided to create this new OpenJS Foundation, which is a merger of two previous foundations, and then it's basically a conglomeration of 31 different open source projects, is really so we have this new all-encompassing structure. That way there's less redundancy between all these different organizations trying to support the JavaScript community. So this new OpenJS Foundation is really here to enhance community engagement, provide better resource access, host projects, and collaboratively fund activities that benefit, the entire JavaScript ecosystem. And of course, the OpenJS Foundation, hopefully their activities make it easy for onboarding new members. We mentioned they already got 30 members, including Google and Microsoft. Hopefully they've made it so that new members have an easy path for joining. And the fourth story on the docket tonight involves the idea of convergence. Many people have tried this in the past and failed miserably. Will PureOS be the one to succeed? So this article comes from Stephen J. Von Nichols over at ZDNet. PureOS, one Linux for both PC and smartphone. So when we talk about convergence, we're talking about building an operating system that runs on multiple form factors. In particular, does it run on both the desktop, laptop, PC, and mobile devices such as your smartphone? People have tried this in the past. Again, several companies have tried this and failed miserably, including Canonical. Will PureOS succeed where others have failed? PureOS, by the way, is an operating system designed by the folks over at Purism, and Purism is in a really unique position here to make this happen because Purism actually builds both Linux laptops and phones. So they're already building hardware. So can they build the operating system to run on that hardware and achieve this dream of convergence? They're, like I said, in a little bit different position than a company like Canonical because, of course, Canonical didn't make any hardware. They were just making the Ubuntu operating system, but they really didn't have any kind of control over the hardware that operating system, Ubuntu Touch, was trying to run on. So Ubuntu had tried this. In particular, Mark Shuttleworth, the CEO of Ubuntu, for many years was all on the convergence train, right? Ubuntu was going to make the dream of convergence a reality. And for several years, Canonical developed their convergent operating system, Ubuntu Touch, that was going to run on, PCs and tablets and phones and everything else. Canonical eventually had to give up that dream. They discontinued work on the Ubuntu Touch platform because it was costing them a lot of money, paying developers to do all this, and they weren't really making any money with Ubuntu Touch. A few devices did ship with the Ubuntu Touch operating system, but not that many, and not that many people bought those devices. So, is PureOS going to succeed where somebody like Canonical failed? Well, possibly. First of all, convergence. We should also clarify, other than convergence meaning this OS is going to run on multiple form factors, it's more than just putting it on the form factor. I mean, technically, I could probably get a GNU/Linux distribution working on my phone and a tablet and a PC and a laptop, and I could probably do that, but it would be unusable on some of those devices. The point is that it actually works on all those devices, has a consistent look and feel. Like, you can tell that that's PureOS on my desktop and that's PureOS on my phone, and they both work, right? And that's what PureOS is trying to achieve. And again, they're in a little bit of a unique situation, because they have complete control over the software, the source code, and of course the hardware itself, because they build the devices. The tricky part here is not the desktop, getting something like PureOS to run on the desktop. That's already taken care of. We have Linux, right? The tricky part is the mobile devices, mainly because of CPU architecture. Different devices require basically different architectures. Also, different architectures between the CPU in a phone and the CPU in the Librem laptop, for example. Completely different architectures, so it's complicated. Building an operating system that runs on these different devices is a really complicated process. Other tricky areas to tackle with the trying to design one operating system, multiple devices. Scaling, an application may look great on your laptop's 15-inch display, but when you try to launch that same application on the Librem phone that has a 5-inch display with a very different aspect ratio, the app could look like total garbage. So again, it's very complicated, very complex. Now, I believe the PureOS supports both the GNOME and the KDE Plasma mobile interfaces, so GNOME and KDE both have mobile interfaces. I do know that Purism has been working on trying to adapt some of the GNOME apps for PureOS. So will they succeed in the convergence arena? I got to be honest, I doubt it. Nobody else has. I think it's one of those things that it sounds great when people talk about it, the idea of convergence, but honestly, what I do on my desktop, with, I make videos, for example, and later I'm going to edit these these clips that I'm recording on my camera in something like Caden Live, and then I'm going to upload it to YouTube, and, I'll make a thumbnail using GIMP, and, I might filter some audio with Audacity. Do I really want to do any of that on my phone? Even if the same operating system worked on my phone, the work I do on my desktop, I don't want to do on my phone. That's not the right tool for that job. And same thing with the phone. Some of the stuff I do on my phone, I'm sitting, waiting for an appointment at the dentist's office, and I'm playing Candy Crush or whatever. That's fine for that device. I don't sit here and do anything like that on my desktop when I'm sitting here at my desktop trying to actually do work. So this convergence idea, I don't think anybody's ever going to really succeed at it. But it is intriguing. I'm rooting for the folks over at Purism. If they get it working and the idea catches on, who knows? Maybe I'll purchase one of the Librem phones and the Librem laptops and check it out. And the fifth and final story on the docket tonight is the announcement that Mozilla Firefox, they've announced their stable release of their free and encrypted file sharing service that they call Firefox Send. So this is an article from It's False. So Firefox Send, actually, let me just go to Firefox Send. So if you, in the URL, send.firefox.com is the web address, and you can see it is a file sharing service. If you don't sign up, you can still use Firefox Send, but it will only let you upload a file up to 1 gigabyte in size. If you sign up, you can then share files up to 2.5 gigabytes in size. And then you can share the link with people that you want to share, whatever it is you're trying to share. So say I have a file, I want to upload it. I don't even sign up. So I can do a 1 gigabyte file, and it is on the internet temporarily. It doesn't stay there forever, which is not a horrible thing, because again, for privacy, for data mining purposes, these are temporary, and you can set them however long you want them to be on the internet. You can set an expiration date up to 7 days. 7 days is the max, 1 week. So Firefox Send, you upload something, you get a URL, you set the expiration, say I set something for 2 days, and then I give you guys the URL. So over the next 2 days, you guys can check out whatever it was that I sent to Firefox Send to share with you. One of the other neat features with Firefox Send is that you can limit the number of downloads. So if I, upload some PDF document, for example, and I don't want but 10 people to ever see this document, I can limit the number of times that document can be downloaded. Again, I set an expiration for the link as well, maximum of 7 days. You can also password protect your shared link. Of course, Firefox Send is going to have mobile apps coming very soon. There should be an Android app for Firefox Send out anytime. I'm sure there'll probably be something on the iOS devices as well. Personally, I think this is going to be a huge win for Mozilla. A lot of people use these file sharing services, and the fact that you have so much control over it, it's encrypted, and from what they're saying, all your privacy concerns, you shouldn't be worried about this, although I people will take that with a grain of salt. I can hear some of the criticisms now with Firefox Send as far as, is this really private? Because they do ask you to sign up for an account to, for example, be able to upload files bigger than 1 gigabyte in size, max up to 2.5 gigs if you have an account. Why do they need you to sign up for an account? Are they trying to harvest email addresses? I don't personally think that's the case, but I'm sure others may think that. Certainly, these days, we have to be careful on the internet. We have to be careful with our privacy and security. Me personally, I somewhat trust Mozilla. I certainly distrust others more than I distrust Mozilla. So personally, I would have no problem using Firefox Send. And as a matter of fact, I probably will use Firefox Send just because they make it so easy. I probably won't ever bother signing up for an account. I'll just do it anonymously, right? Because you don't even have to sign up as long as you're fine with that 1 gigabyte limitation. And that was the fifth and final story on the docket tonight. This was Taking Into Account episode 33. I tried to release a new episode of Taking Into Account every Thursday, although I had to release this one on Friday due to my work schedule. But look for Taking Into Account episode 34, hopefully sometime next Thursday. And before I go, usually on these episodes, I try to end the program by reading a viewer question or comment. I did something a little bit different this week. I posted something over at my YouTube channel. So I posted a poll. Basically, I announced that Taking Into Account episode 33 would be delayed this week. I wouldn't be able to release it Thursday. I was going to release it Friday due to scheduling conflicts. And then I apologized to you guys for the inconvenience. And I said, in the meantime, a poll. What is your favorite plain text editor? And I gave 4 choices, well, 5 choices, but 4 real choices. The choices were Emacs, Nano, Vim, Notepad++, or something else I asked you to explain in the comments. And I was actually quite surprised, pleasantly surprised by the results of this very unscientific poll. 851 of you guys voted in this poll, and Vim crushed the competition. Kind of shockingly to me. I did not expect, 62% of you guys, 6 in 10 of you use Vim. That is your plain text editor of choice. I would have never guessed that. I would have thought, actually, GNU Nano would have blown away the competition. But GNU Nano was second place, a very, very distant second place to Vim, but still second place, respectable. Emacs, shockingly, had 10%. Now, I didn't expect very many Emacs users out there. You don't hear about Emacs the way you hear about Vim. It's just not that many Emacs users out there. But it did finish ahead of Notepad++ at 6%, and then 6% of you, something else. I actually expected the something else category to be actually quite massive. I expected a lot of people using things like Sublime, Atom, VS Code, even gedit, Genie, Kate, a lot of, those plain text editors like that. But again, you guys that voted for Vim, I really appreciate that. It has restored my faith in humanity. And before I go, I do want to thank a few special people. This show was made possible by Ansem, Carlos, Chris, Douglas, Dylan, Leo, Rob, Robert, and Tony. They are the producers of the show. They are my highest tier patrons over on Patreon. Without them, this episode of Taking Into Account would not have been possible. This show was also brought to you by all those names you see on the screen, all those fine ladies and gentlemen that help support my work over on Patreon. Again, without them, none of this would be possible. If you'd like to support my work, please consider doing so. You'll find me at DistroTube over on Patreon. Alright guys, peace.